Welcome back. And we're back to the beginning, to Genesis, where it all started. And we'll be picking up from the story of Abraham, like I said. Did you read it? Like, it was so many things. Like, there were so many lessons. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to, like, cover everything. So I hope you read it and probably have some lessons of your own. So, but I will just be sharing some of the things that stood out for me, mostly. But first, before I start, man, wealth was really a thing in the Old Testament, don't you think? Like all the things that they had, and you'd wonder, did they really have to even work that hard, like the way we have to be able to amass the amount of wealth that people have now? And then God was just like giving it out for free, like to obviously people that he favored. So speaking of wealth, what I noticed that Abraham was a wealthy man, and he went into Egypt because of a famine, but when he was leaving, he left very, very full. Lot also became wealthy as a result of his relationship and association with Abraham. So that goes to tell you, how sometimes wealth might be transferable by osmosis. I'm kidding. But maybe back in the day, obviously, because of the favor that God had for Abraham. Because if we remember, Abraham was who God had chosen to bless the family of the earth through. So he was already a blessing. So I guess everything associated with him had to be blessed as well. Did you notice how Abram, as his name was at that time, was indifferent about which land he'd get when he and Lot had to separate? So remember, because they had too much, and then there were like fights breaking out, and he was like, you know what, so move. And he was just like, where do you want? And Lot, did a very strategic consideration and took like the place that was fertile and all. Well, too bad for him, he chose the place that had him surrounded by enemies, and he got in between a war and even got captured, and Abraham had to save him at the end of the day. So sometimes really the lesson I got from this was like everything that looks so good may not be so good at the end, and always just trust God. Like I loved just reading. Abraham was unbothered. What do you want? Oh, take it, it's fine, I'll take the other way. If you want the east, I'll go to the west. I said that was such a boss thing. Now let's get to something that has always been a very like iffy topic, so to speak. So did you read the part about Melchizedek, the king of Salem, and how when Abraham was coming back from rescuing Lot, he met him and he gave him a tithe. That word, a tithe. And how tithing is such a thing, in churches, and people always use this as an example to say, oh, this is Old Testament stuff. Now, I'm not going to go into tithing, but I will tell you what I believe and what I sense and what I have come to believe about the whole Melchizedek. Yeah, today I can't pronounce stuff. So Melchizedek was a curious character, a king, and his name meant king of righteousness. And he was the king of Salem, and Salem meant peace. So king of righteousness and peace. And he was the priest of the Most High. He gave Abram bread and wine, and Abram gave him a tithe, and blessed him. Now I believe that Melchizedek was an archetype of Jesus. I believe he was the pre-incarnate Christ on earth in that day. And there's so many reasons I believe this, and obviously I've had to like listen to so many teachings and words, so you might want to do your own research. But there were just some things that stood out to me. He gave him bread and wine. Jesus, today we celebrate his table, we remember his sacrifice by bread and wine. So yeah, and then his name and everything. Anyway, I could go to a whole spiel about this, but I just thought to bring out this story of Melchizedek and how I believe that he's an archetype of Jesus on earth. When God told Abraham that he was going to have a son, he believed him in spite of how impossible it appeared, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Even though he believed, he asked God for confirmation, and God gave him instructions to set up the scene for a covenant between them, and some really strange things happened. Yeah, I was like, yeah, this place is weird. But then obviously, yeah, from what I understand, those were the sort of terms or the things that happened when there was like a master cut a covenant with his slave. So for me, I think that what I took away from this scene was the fact that Abraham believed him, but then also ask for a confirmation. So sometimes, people think that faith just needs to just be blind, but sometimes I think it's okay to now say, God, okay, fine. How would I know? And then God will be happy. Like he told me, okay, right. As in, I'm sure he was so excited. Okay, set this up, set this up, set this up. And a deep sleep came upon Abraham, and hey presto, the covenant was cut. Now let's get to my getting to know God moment. I believe that God is a promise maker and a covenant keeper. The symbolism of passing through the halved animals is explained by an ancient act of cutting or making covenant between a slave and master. Another key takeaway was how God responded to Abram's belief in what he told him. He counted it for him as righteousness. Faith pleases God. In Hebrews 11:6, it says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. And I believe that Abraham's faith might be the reason why he was chosen to be the father of all nations. God had big plans for Abram, and he had no idea about them. He was going to bless the nations through him. The Savior of the world would eventually come from his descendants. Do you ever wonder what plans God has for you and your generation? What's stopping you from believing the things that God is telling you or asking you to do? I think that today will be a good day for you to reassess, and my only advice to you will be have faith. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow we will continue in the story of Abram, and I hope that you read ahead of me, and I'll see you here next episode, which is tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Bye.